to extending the invite to all of us tonight. I appreciate the audience. Thank you so much for coming. A little history for me is that about 5.5 years ago, I was approached by friends in Northeast PA. Even though it's a second home for us, I've been there as family since 1955. And they said to me, something's happening in our community. We are seeing activity of these people called landmen, and they're going around to neighbors and they're trying to get them to sign leases. So the communities decided to form a small group. If any of you know our area, that became quite different pretty quickly. But a small group that is going to see what's going on, try to do a little research and advanced feelers to find out what this is about and make sure we don't get into trouble. So the group started with, I wasn't one of the original people, I came in a couple months later. About 8 people started in their dining room table visiting each other and trying to figure out what this was all about. Historically, there had been these kind of bites before because they've always known that Marcellus Shale was underneath the land, but it kind of blossomed. So the long and short of it was I became very involved, chairing several committees, including the Environmental Protection Committee, which role was to develop the parts of the lease on environmental protection for the landowners, particularly water. Every meeting we had with the general membership was, my water is not protected, I am not going to sign the lease. So our first lease was an outrageously large document, totally unwieldy in the marketplace. We wrote the lease with our lawyers and presented it to the market. The unwieldy part was mine. It was all the environmental protection components. And I basically realized that I was rewriting the National Park Service's Gold Book on gas drilling. I kind of borrowed a lot from it. It was a good book. In the long run, the 3 keywords in any lease are best management practices. And we learned we could pare down my 100+ pages of the lease to those 3 words. And as long as it says best management practices, that is the industry standard for whatever's the best out there. If it's no pits, it's no pits. If it's recycling, it's recycling. If it's reducing chemicals, it's reducing chemicals. And that protects the landowners. As I was going through the whole process, I was always tapped as a speaker for some reason. Maybe a bit of my background in comfort level in audiences, and also being a researcher in the healthcare field. Because obviously what reared its head, this is going to impact public health. This is going to be a big problem. We're going to contaminate our water. I'm not a water expert. There are people out there that do that side of it. But on the health side, there was a lot of scare going on, and most of it was born in our community. If you know where Northeast PA is and the Damascus area, that's all the heart of the movement against gas drilling. There came a time when I was looking at everything and said, well, our area has no history. Even the state of Pennsylvania doesn't have a real long history in the horizontal hydraulic fracturing and its impact on the community's health. But we do have an area in the country that has a long enough history to be able to draw inferences to the impact. So I made a hypothesis. I'm going to look at the area around Fort Worth, Texas. I'm going to look at the 4 counties surrounding the city of Fort Worth. And particularly, I'm going to pull out Fort Worth itself. In Fort Worth, from 1999 to 2009, 2010, there were 1,000 horizontally fracked gas wells in the city limits. New gas wells, 1,000. I said to me, and I said it to the EPA when I presented to them, that is your canary in the coal mine. We're all from that region, right? We understand that phrase? If we're going to find health problems, we're going to find it in this area. We're going to see it. And we're going to see it after a 10-year period because it's going to infiltrate the area quickly if there's a problem. So my hypothesis was, yes, natural gas drilling and hydraulic fracturing does negatively impact the health of the community. Based on everything I'd heard from so many different angles and all the news and all the lighted faucets and everything else, I was like, I'm going to find this is true. And that's a good researcher. You're willing to be finding your hypothesis is true. So I went into Texas, and they do a really great job of collecting health data. Most states do now. They produce a couple-page report that's their state health department statistics. And I was able to pull for each county, and I was able to pull for the city of Fort Worth. And I was looking at the major indices like lung disease, cancer rates, infant mortality, low birth weight in stillborn babies, things that would be impacted pretty quickly by environmental problems. As I reviewed the data and pulled each county out, I was really surprised. It was beyond what I ever expected. I just expected no impact at all at best, and probably finding a problem somehow, some way at worst. In truth, it turned around to actually show that the people were getting better. And that was contrary to everything that had been said everywhere. Now, a lot of people might say that's the breakdown of the population changing. But during this same period, on average in that region, the elderly increased, those of you in healthcare, increased by 29%. So the population increased at the age 65 and older by 29%, and yet the indices were going down. Now, I went to Yale, and one of the best things we learned in the whole realm of hospital administration and healthcare is the Greenwich Village phenomenon, is what we called it at Yale, or Greenwich, Connecticut, I'm sorry. And it was always brought up in class. The phenomenon is Greenwich, Connecticut has the healthiest population in the country, at least it did when I went. It also has the wealthiest population in the country. So when you go back and look and do the corollary of the Greenwich scenario to Texas, the influx of prosperity that came to these communities in Texas created better health. They had better access, they had the money to pay for dental work. I don't know if many people know you can die of bad teeth. If you go do genealogy research like I do, many of the death records in the 1800s were death by tooth abscess. Okay, it was pretty big back then. So better finances create better health. I didn't expect to see the phenomenal numbers I saw, and it was double digit in every indices that I looked at. Step one, in one county, out of the 5 areas I studied, there was one county that had a hiccup. And the anti-drilling people landed on it because they peer-reviewed my research immediately. When I presented it to the DRVC, the room was completely quiet. I had 3 other members who were physicians, including a pediatrician, come to me immediately afterwards and say, what are your sources? How did you get that information? And they peer-reviewed it within 2 months. They did find this hiccup, which was one, I think it was Denton County, had a higher rate, an increase of 7% in breast cancer rate. I went and said, as all researchers do, I don't know how many do numbers, but they're like, uh-oh, what did I miss? This is a phenomenon, it's not the whole area, but what did I miss? I redid my study 3 times in total, not so much because I wanted to, but my computer crashed. All the numbers consistently came out with the same results, but yes, this phenomenon of breast cancer increase did keep showing up in the one particular county. So I went back and I looked at the population mix in that county. And in that mix, it turned out that the female population from 45 to 65 increased by over 40%. Okay? And they went up 7% in breast cancer rate. So I actually looked back, was able to say, we're not in trouble here. This is what you found, but this is why you found it. And therefore, in the long run, the hypothesis has been proven false. As I walk through this scenario of 5 years of getting a off-the-cuff PhD in gas drilling and health impact on natural gas on health, literally I feel like I've been through 3 PhDs doing this, including lease negotiations and landowner coalitions and the whole bit. I literally have seen so many exaggerations occur in the news media, in the meetings that I go to, in the movies. I actually didn't finish watching Drop Dead Diva this weekend because the final episode was her representing an Amish guy whose farm water had been contaminated. And I wrote them a scathing remark on Twitter, and I turned off the show. I could care less what the cliffhanger was in the end. So it's constant out there with the media being held by people who would rather sensationalize the issues than look at scientific research. Scientific research, pretty boring, and it's not going to make the news that often. And the bottom line is, though, that's what's needed in the discussion. It's been long lacking. We have $48 million was awarded by President Obama almost 2 years ago now to research the health impact of hydraulic fracturing on communities. Where all that money went, I don't know. I know Geisinger got $1 million to look at their patient base. It's a long-term study, so we won't get answers for a while. Whether we've seen any of these other studies materialize, most of them went to universities, some went to state health departments, very few went anywhere else that I know of. But the stats need to be presented, the real numbers need to be presented. I went to that meeting in DC and saw so many amazing research projects being done on air quality, blood toxicology studies, water migration studies, health impacts in individual communities. It's there. It's not hitting your news, but it's there. So far, two leaders of the EPA have both said, we have yet to find one case where hydraulic fracturing has contaminated water. Now, maybe other activities that are similar to what you get when you build a warehouse or dig a well for a community or anything else can cause some problems, but it's not due to hydraulic fracturing. So the science needs to be there, and I believe the presentation that follows me is about a very good study that's been done on children, right? Is that the next person? Oh, let me do that. Oh, I'm supposed to say, are there any questions?